Welcome to Image Blue Shell here, a live video for you. The Panasonic GH5 S is announced today. A lot of speculation being on the internet about the GH5 S. Myself, I thought it was a rumor that would not be coming true until 3 days ago. The spec was surfacing and they have a picture of that camera all over the internet. When you think about it, GH5 recently released about a year ago, and GH5 was like the flag, a video camera for Panasonic since the GH1, GH2, GH3, and the GH4 itself make big news. Then a lot of people have been waiting for the GH5. GH5 came out a year ago. Now, a year later, we have a GH5 S. The specs are all over the internet, so I'm not going to concern about going over the spec of the GH5 and the GH5 S, the difference between the two of them. We all know both of these cameras are great, and the only thing I learned after the release of that GH5 S is there is no perfect camera, and we will never have a camera that can do everything we want it to do. When we think about the GH5, we all expect that camera to be great, and it is a great camera. But however, we have autofocus problem. The low light wasn't as bad as the GH4 because we all know the macro four thirds sensor always will not attract as much light as a full frame sensor. Therefore, Panasonic felt the need to compete with the A7S, the Sony A7S camera line. He put his own GH5 S out. The camera, from the sample I've seen on the internet, the pictures look great. The camera look like it is almost as good as the Sony A7S II. But however, I think the Sony got a little edge, but the camera is great on its own time. So you already know the specs. This is a 10.2 megapixel camera and no in-body image stabilization. So if that camera could have in-body image stabilization, this would be the best camera ever. So this is where the people that own a GH5 like me, because I'm shooting that live right now on a GH5 using the Webcaster X2. So this camera, because of the in-body image stabilization, if you are doing YouTube video, you are doing wedding, I will prefer to have a GH5 instead of the GH5 S. If you own a GH5, and this is what this video is about, what should you do? Should you go ahead and purchase a GH5 S if you don't have the money? Because the camera costs about $2,499, but I'd rather say $2,399 because they include the vlog in it. So us that purchased that GH5 a year ago, we need to still purchase that vlog for $100. They include the vlog on that GH5 S. What's great about the GH5 S is that dual native ISO. How that works? Every camera got a native ISO. The native ISO, this is like the sweet spot where you're shooting, you can get crispier image, you know, less noise. He has a dual native ISO from 400 and till 20-some thousand. The camera can shoot, and you're gonna keep increasing the noise. When you reach the 2500 mark on the ISO, it's like you go back to 400 again. The camera like start giving you images with less noise and going up. This is exactly what made this camera great. And the Cinema 4K, I own that GH5. I only shoot Cinema 4K for my personal pleasure. I haven't used it to make money with it. So if you got a GH5, it's not a camera that's gonna go on the trash. It will not be a yesteryear camera for a long time, because the GH5 S, they made this camera for a group of people that think, okay, this camera is good, but however, because of this lack of not able to shoot in the dark, as well, that's take away a few things from it. And the in-body image stabilization also could take a few hit on that camera. That's why they take it out, because there's a few you know, when the sensor is moving, it has to adjust itself. They want to put a fixed sensor that is not moving. Don't worry about any stabilization at all. the Cinema 4K, you can do that at 60p, 50p, at 420 10-bit, and the camera can shoot 30p, 25p, 24p, 422 10-bit. We all know we can, on the GH5 Cinema 4K, we can only do that at 24p at 422 10-bit, and 1080p at 180 frames per second. This camera can shoot 1080p at 240 frames per second. But however, if you own that GH5, you've been shooting slow-mo with it, I'm talking about that 180 frames per second, you already know you lost some quality. 120 frames, that would be the highest I usually do when I'm shooting slow-mo on my Panasonic GH5. Like I said before, the Vlog is pre-installed. The price is $2,499, which I say it's $2,399. When you include myself, I have to purchase that Vlog for $100. So the GH5, if you own one, at the beginning when the release was about to announce, I feel like, you know what, I bought a camera a year ago and it's already become an old news. No, it's not. These two cameras, they basically got the same body, except that one has in-body image stabilization, which is the GH5. The GH5 S doesn't have in-body image stabilization. The GH5 S is great at low light. The GH5 is not as good. But if you can remember, when they released that camera a year ago, I'm talking about the GH5, no one was complaining about that the camera was bad in low light. It wasn't great, but everybody said there were a lot of big improvement from the GH4 to the GH5. So if you own a GH5, keep your GH5. The only thing I would do, if you shoot with two cameras, you only have one, I would not go buy myself two GH5. I'll buy myself another GH5 S, that if you can afford it, because when you think about the GH5 costs about $2,000. It's like a penny from $2,000. I hope, you know, it went down. A few people are going to start selling theirs to go get the GH5, which mine, I will keep my camera because I'm shooting with a GH5 and the G85. If I can sell the G85, I'm probably going to go ahead and get myself a GH5S, which, do I pre-order already? Yes, I already put my pre-order because I really need one. I need a GH5S because I'm going to sell my G85 and buy myself a GH5S, because the low light, if you're shooting wedding, we all know that when you get into that reception room, it's a bit dark. Sometimes you have to find light to hit on the ceiling, to hit to, you know, give you a little bit of cleaner image. But however, the GH5 is still a great camera. The autofocus is not a thing at all. It is about the same thing. The same autofocus you have on the GH5, that's what you're going to have on the GH5S. The truth of the matter is, if they did improve the autofocus, I would run after it, because we will know that camera, you can just running and gunning purposes. That's what I do. You know, you pull your camera out, you handheld, you got in-body image stabilization, it's dark, you know, you can shoot with it. And also the I was talking about the autofocus, and also the autofocus will be great. That would not be a problem. But therefore, if the autofocus on the GH5 and the G85 and the GH5 is the same, GH5 and the GH5S is the same. So really, there is not, it's basically to me two different cameras. The GH5, which is a better camera that you can shoot pictures and that also can do great video. The GH5S with the 10.2 megapixel, you're gonna lose a lot, because the 10.2 megapixel, that's what makes that camera great at low light. The pixel become bigger, but when you're shooting photo, the more megapixel, the better. When you're shooting video, the less megapixel, the better the camera will be at low light. So as we say, it's a 10.2 megapixel and GH5 20.3 megapixel 10-bit versus 14-bit on the GH5S. No in-body image stabilization on the GH5S. We have in-body image stabilization on the GH5. We have a dual native ISO from 400 to 2500. That's what makes this camera great at low light. I explained it, from 400 to 2400 and some. When the camera reaches 2500, it's basically reset itself to the next dual whatever native ISO they got that make that camera great. Cinema 4K, you can shoot 60-50p at 420 10-bit, or you can do 30p, 25p, 24p at 422 10-bit on the GH5 S. On the GH5, you can only do Cinema 4K at 24p, 422 10-bit, variable frame rate 1080p. You can shoot 120 frames per second on your GH5. You can shoot 240 frames per second on the GH5 S at 1080p. Vlog pre-install, and the anamorphic mode, we got a better anamorphic mode where we can shoot on the GH5, not on the GH5 S. So those are the difference between the two cameras. So my purpose here is to tell you, if you have a GH5, that camera is not anywhere yet to be a yesteryear camera. It's still a very good camera, very capable of shooting. You don't have to be in a rush to think that, okay, let me get myself a GH5 S. There is no purpose for that at this time right now, because that camera, if you shooting wedding, you do every kind of running and gunning style video, the end-body stabilization, the end-body image stabilization, it's a better option to have than to have that low light. And this camera is not bad at low light, you know. So it is a 3200 ISO. You can shoot at that. Myself, that's the highest I will go. But I can tell you, if you pair this camera with some good lens, and if you also can add that Sigma 18-35, with that Metabond speed booster, trust me, you have a Metabond speed booster GH5 S that can shoot great in every quality you want it. You're gonna have steady image. You won't have any steady shot when you handheld on that GH5 S. And if you put that Metabond on your camera, the GH5, you will get quality image in almost any situation. And trust me, any image is better when you lead it than when you're trying to bump up your ISO to clean that noise on the background. So this was my purpose. You know, all the specs are all over the place. So I'm shooting right now. I am live. I'm shooting with the Webcaster X2 live using my Panasonic GH5. Was planning on using my G85. If you can see it, it's right there on the background. But this is when I figured out that I didn't have that micro HDMI to HDMI, so I can plug it from my Webcaster to the camera. I would like to thank you for watching. So if you are not a subscriber to this channel, we want you to subscribe. As I said, I have one. I don't know when they're gonna have them, but I have one coming to me, a GH5 S, in the near future. So stay. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe. If you haven't hit the bell, go ahead, hit the bell so you can know exactly when I upload new content, because it is important. Google right now basically filtered how it sent those videos to people. So I would love for you to hit the bell, subscribe. We love you here. Without you, ImaxTube is nothing. So thank you again, you that been a subscriber. And stay tuned. If you're a GH5 shooter, keep your heads up. So this camera right here releasing today, the GH5 S, it cannot replace the GH5 because they both released this camera for two groups of people. The GH5 S is basically for more advanced people shooter, because you can see there's no in-body image stabilization. And also, these people really, they don't care about in-body image stabilization. They basically mount this camera on a car to basically be running it, and this is exactly why they don't have that, because when you're moving that sensor and the sensor is trying to shift itself, you know, it's really not good. That's why they take that in-body image stabilization out. Thank you for watching. So please subscribe to this channel, and as always, I will catch you on the next video. GH5 all the way. Let's get it. Right click. Give it a right click.